When Dolly Parton walks into a room, the entire music industry stops to pay attention. For over 5 decades, she's been America's sweetheart, the woman who taught us that you can be both fierce and kind, successful and humble. But what happens when someone pushes the queen of country music too far? What happens when her legendary patience finally snaps? Behind those sparkling eyes and that infectious smile lies a woman who's weathered storms that would have destroyed lesser artists. She's faced betrayal from mentors, theft from colleagues, and disrespect from industry giants who thought they could walk all over a girl from the Tennessee mountains. You see, Dolly Parton doesn't hate easily. In fact, those who know her best will tell you she doesn't hate at all. But there's something more powerful than hate, something that runs deeper and lasts longer. There's disappointment so profound it changes how you see someone forever. There's professional betrayal that cuts to the bone. There's the kind of hurt that makes you realize some people were never really on your side to begin with. Throughout her legendary career, 5 names have emerged from the shadows of Nashville's most guarded secrets. 5 individuals who crossed lines that should never be crossed. 5 moments when Dolly's grace met someone else's greed, ego, or plain old nastiness. These aren't stories of petty celebrity squabbles or manufactured drama for tabloid headlines. These are tales of real conflict between real people in an industry where loyalty is rare and trust is a luxury most can't afford. The first shock might surprise you because it involves someone who helped launch her career but then tried to own it completely. The second will make you question everything you thought you knew about music industry friendships. The third involves a legend so big that saying no to him felt like career suicide, but Dolly did it anyway. The fourth shows what happens when someone attacks not just Dolly's reputation but her very soul. And the fifth reveals how even fellow songwriters can harbor jealousy that runs deeper than professional rivalry. But here's what makes this story different from every other celebrity feud you've heard about. Dolly didn't just survive these battles, she transformed them into lessons about standing up for yourself when everyone expects you to stay quiet. She turned betrayal into strength, disappointment into wisdom, and professional wounds into personal growth. By the time we're done, you'll understand why Dolly Parton isn't just a country music icon, she's a masterclass in handling conflict with dignity while never backing down from a fight that matters. Before we dive into these shocking revelations, you need to understand who Dolly Parton really is beneath the rhinestones and big hair. Because the woman who would eventually stand toe-to-toe with music industry powerhouses started with absolutely nothing. Born in a one-room cabin in rural Tennessee, Dolly was the 4th of 12 children in a family so poor they paid the doctor who delivered her with a bag of cornmeal. Her father couldn't read or write, her mother was overwhelmed with mouths to feed, and entertainment meant gathering around the radio if they were lucky enough to have batteries. But poverty couldn't dim the fire burning inside young Dolly Rebecca Parton. While other kids played with store-bought toys, she was writing songs and performing them for anyone who would listen. By age 10, she was already appearing on local television shows in Knoxville, and by 13, she was recording her first single. The day after graduating high school in 1964, she packed everything she owned into a single suitcase and headed to Nashville with nothing but raw talent and dreams bigger than the Smoky Mountains she left behind. That's where she met Porter Wagoner, the man who would become both her biggest break and her most complicated relationship. Porter wasn't just any country star, he was a force of nature with his own syndicated television show reaching millions of viewers every week. When he offered 18-year-old Dolly a spot as his female vocalist, it seemed like a fairy tale come true. Finally, someone who believed in her talent enough to give her a national platform. But fairy tales rarely tell you about the fine print, and Porter's contract contained clauses that would haunt Dolly for years. What started as mentorship slowly revealed itself as something much more controlling. Porter didn't just want to showcase Dolly's talent, he wanted to own it completely. Every song she recorded, every appearance she made, every business decision about her career had to go through him first. For a young woman who had been writing her own songs since childhood and making her own choices since she was barely a teenager, this level of control felt suffocating. The breaking point came when Dolly realized that Porter saw her not as a partner or even a protégé, but as property. When she tried to assert creative control over her own music, when she pushed for solo opportunities, when she dared to have opinions about her own career direction, Porter made it clear that he viewed such independence as betrayal. The sweet mentorship had curdled into something possessive and bitter, setting the stage for a legal battle that would shock the country music world and reveal just how ruthless the industry could be. The explosion came in 1974 when Dolly announced she was leaving Porter's show to pursue her solo career. To the public, their joint statement painted a picture of mutual respect and natural progression. Behind closed doors, Porter was furious. This wasn't just about losing his star female vocalist, this was about losing control over what he considered his greatest discovery. He had invested years grooming Dolly into a household name, and now she wanted to walk away and take all that success with her. But Dolly underestimated just how far Porter was willing to go to maintain his grip on her career. 5 years after their supposedly amicable split, Porter blindsided her with a $3 million lawsuit. He claimed breach of contract, unpaid management fees, and demanded a percentage of every dollar she had earned since leaving his show. For Dolly, who had always viewed Porter as a father figure despite their differences, this legal assault felt like the ultimate betrayal. The man who had once promised to help her achieve her dreams was now trying to destroy those very dreams in court. The lawsuit revealed Porter's true colors in ways that shocked even seasoned industry insiders. Court documents painted a picture of a man who believed he owned not just Dolly's professional services, but her creative output, her personal brand, and her future earning potential. It wasn't enough that he had profited handsomely from their partnership, he wanted to continue profiting from her success long after she had moved on. What hurt Dolly most wasn't the money he was demanding, it was the realization that their entire relationship had been built on his belief that she owed him everything. The legal battle dragged on for months, generating headlines that threatened to overshadow Dolly's burgeoning solo career. Music industry executives whispered about taking sides, wondering whether supporting the rising star meant alienating the established powerhouse. But Dolly refused to be intimidated. She had grown up fighting for every opportunity, every song, every moment in the spotlight. She wasn't about to let Porter's lawyers undo years of her own hard work. Eventually, the case was settled out of court, but the emotional damage was permanent. Dolly would later say that losing Porter's friendship hurt more than any amount of money ever could, but she had learned a valuable lesson about the difference between mentors and manipulators. Years later, when Porter was dying of lung cancer, Dolly visited him in the hospital. She had forgiven him, but she had never forgotten the lesson he taught her about standing up to powerful men who mistake kindness for weakness. If Porter taught Dolly about the dangers of male mentors who turn possessive, her next major conflict would teach her an entirely different lesson about female solidarity in an industry that often pits women against each other. Enter Linda Ronstadt, the rock and pop sensation whose voice could soar from tender ballads to powerhouse anthems. When Linda joined forces with Dolly and Emmylou Harris to form the supergroup trio in the 1980s, it seemed like a dream collaboration between three of music's most respected female voices. On paper, everything looked perfect. Three Grammy-winning artists at the height of their powers, each bringing their unique style to create something unprecedented in country and pop music. The harmonies were celestial, the song selections were inspired, and the marketing potential was enormous. But from the very first recording session, it became clear that Linda and Dolly had completely different approaches to making music, and those differences would create friction that lasted for decades. Dolly, who had been writing and recording songs since she was a teenager, worked with the efficiency of someone who trusted her instincts. She believed in capturing the magic of a moment, recording songs in 1 or 2 takes when the energy was right. Linda, however, was a perfectionist who could spend entire days perfecting a single vocal line, analyzing every breath, every inflection, every nuance until it met her exacting standards. What started as creative differences quickly devolved into something more personal. Linda began making comments about Dolly's work ethic, suggesting that her quick recording style was somehow less professional than Linda's meticulous approach. She criticized Dolly for being late to sessions, for wanting to wrap up recordings too quickly, for not taking the collaboration as seriously as Linda thought it deserved. But what Linda didn't understand was that Dolly's approach wasn't carelessness, it was confidence. After decades of writing hits and recording albums, Dolly knew when something worked. The tension exploded during the recording of their second album when Linda made public statements questioning Dolly's reliability and professionalism. In interviews, she described Dolly as flaky and suggested that the group's delays were entirely due to Dolly's scheduling conflicts and lack of commitment. For someone who had built her career on being dependable, hardworking, and professional, these accusations cut deep. Linda had essentially accused Dolly of being everything she had spent her entire career proving she wasn't. But Linda's public criticism was nothing compared to what came next. In 1976, Elvis Presley himself wanted to record Dolly's masterpiece, I Will Always Love You. For any songwriter, having the king of rock and roll request your song should have been the ultimate honor. But Elvis came with Colonel Tom Parker, his notoriously ruthless manager who demanded 50% of all publishing rights for any song Elvis recorded. Dolly faced an impossible choice: give half her most precious creation to a man who had done nothing to earn it, or say no to Elvis Presley and risk being blacklisted by the most powerful forces in music. Dolly chose principle over profit, and Elvis never forgave her for it. According to those close to the situation, the king took her refusal as a personal insult, unable to understand why anyone would turn down the opportunity to have Elvis Presley record their song. But Dolly understood something Elvis didn't: giving away half the rights to her most personal song would have set a precedent that could have destroyed her entire publishing catalog. Years later, when Whitney Houston's version became a global phenomenon, Dolly's decision was vindicated in the most spectacular way possible. The attacks weren't always about business or creative differences. In 2008, radio shock jock Howard Stern orchestrated perhaps the cruelest assault on Dolly's character in her entire career. Using audio editing technology, his team spliced together clips from Dolly's audiobook to create fake interviews where she appeared to make racist and vulgar comments completely contrary to everything she stood for. The fabricated audio was so convincing that some listeners believed Dolly had actually said these horrible things. For someone who had spent her entire career building a reputation based on kindness, authenticity, and treating everyone with respect regardless of their background, Stern's audio manipulation felt like character assassination. Dolly issued one of the strongest statements of her career, threatening legal action and expressing her devastation at having her voice used to spread hatred she would never endorse. Even fellow musicians sometimes couldn't resist taking shots at the Queen of Country. Jeff Tweedy of Wilco publicly dismissed Dolly's songwriting as superficial, suggesting she should have stopped writing after Jolene. His comments revealed the kind of intellectual snobbery that often dismisses accessible, heartfelt music as somehow less worthy than more complex compositions. Through every betrayal, every lawsuit, every public attack, Dolly emerged stronger and more determined. She learned that success attracts both admirers and enemies, that kindness is sometimes mistaken for weakness, and that the price of being authentic in an artificial industry is constant vigilance against those who would exploit your goodness for their gain.